Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day today to join us for retirement planning, navigating the 12 financial risks of retirement. This is Spencer Prince. I'm the Director of Operations for the North Carolina office for the Foundation for Financial Education. I see a few of you were on our initial webinar in late July, which was Financial Pitfalls. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a 501c3 educational nonprofit. We're based out of Washington, D.C. I run the state of North Carolina for the foundation. We're nationwide. We've been in existence 13 years now. A little bit about us. We exist to teach financial literacy to the public. We originally, for the first probably 7 or 8 years, just taught federal government offices in D.C. If you ever care to check our references out, we teach the Pentagon, the Mark Center, which is an extension of the Pentagon, the FDA, Walter Reed, Department of Interior. We've been highly vetted. So we exist, again, to teach financial literacy. We're funded through grants. We don't charge federal or state offices to teach this information. We take a different perspective. A lot of organizations, have retirement planners and 401k offerings, and that's great. We're not here to take you away from that at all. We're here to provide a different perspective on risks associated with tax liability, with Social Security decisions, with Medicare, Medicaid. We do a lot of that. This workshop here is going to kind of build upon the first one, financial pitfalls. We have generally in person a lot of questions, right? Since COVID, all of our lives have changed as far as how we meet and do business. I like in-person meetings. I enjoy the energy. I can see hands, I can see body language. This is a different perspective for like the past 3 months. So just know that there are several things I say here where normally I would get hands. I'll try to explain the best I can. With that said, you will have time to ask questions. I'm happy to answer any questions. There's a lot of folks who will ask specific questions to their tax brackets, to their situations. That's why we, at the end of this webinar, you're going to have a survey. It asks if the information was relevant, pertinent. Please fill it out. Give us comments. I read all of them. I take it to heart. I don't take offense to people who say I talk too fast, because I tend to. If the information is not relevant or could be better, I don't take offense to that. Let me know. Just be very honest. But I'll leave some time at the end. I try to go about 40 to 45 minutes. If you have questions, we'll go for it. We can't get too micro into the information, which is why we send the survey out. Some of you know that we send out emails asking if there are things that you had questions on. Anyway, won't spend too much time on that. But if you have questions, we do not charge you. We are happy to help you. We do not charge we're already funded. So if you have questions on your specific circumstances, feel free to email them. A lot of folks are not happy with, they're not comfortable with asking questions over a public domain. So again, Spencer Prince, we are going to cover retirement planning and navigating the 12 risks of retirement. This is actually my favorite webinar workshop. It really goes deep into tax exemption. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. This is where, if someone, when people ask me, Spencer, what is your niche? What do you do that my financial planner, if you will, or my 401k provider does not focus on? That's a really good question. And if someone were to ask me that, and when people do ask me that, like on my own personal circle, I would say we focus on tax liability and ways that you can maneuver around the new current economy that we're in. We are in a different world economically, with taxation, inflation, volatility, now the pandemic. There are so many variables, that are unanswerable right now. And so I would say that the niche that we provide is really about tactics going forward. And I tell folks, for instance, you might be with an advisor or a company that's offering you 18% returns, and that's great. But if at the end of the day, if you are being taxed to high heaven and you're too exposed to ups and downs of volatility, I've seen folks making a consistent 5 to 7% a year that have done very well with strategy and tax exemption really keep pace with or outpace those that are doing better, numbers wise. I'll give you an example just real quick before we get started. It's not uncommon when I meet with federal or state employees for them to come in and say, listen, in my working years, my wife and I had 2 incomes and we made XYZ and we were doing okay. Now that we're retired, our kids are grown, all of our debt and home was paid off. We have 6 streams of income, meaning they have their pensions, they both have Social Security, they both have their 401ks or 403bs or TSPs if you're a federal employee, which is the government's 401k version. We have 6, and I'm speaking from their perspective, we have 6 streams of income, no debt, and own everything, but we're seeing less than we saw in our working years. Why is that? Well, because they weren't prepared for the taxable liability. They weren't prepared strategy-wise. They were just taught how to make money, not strategize. So that's the point I'm getting to, is you can actually put yourself in a position to make more in retirement with no debt than you were in your working years and be seeing less. So that's kind of the point I get to with what the foundations in a bird's eye, in a bird's eye view, that's what we do. So the 12 financial risks, let's cover them. Let me get to, oops. Okay, risk number 1, longevity risk. Let me move my window over here. Sorry, I can't see the full screen right now, so I'm going to move my window over here so I can. Longevity risk, the risk of outliving your money. The average life expectancy in the U.S. is 78.8 years. It is 81.2 for women, 78.4% for men. Actually, recently I've actually seen that go up. This is from 2015. I've actually seen that go up. Bottom line is people are living a lot longer. Typically in retirement, from what I see, people are living anywhere from probably 17 to 20 years once they retire into retirement with medical advancements, with health advancements. People are living a lot longer, and the risk of outliving your money is a very, very serious risk that people are facing today. Running out of money is continually cited as a top concern among baby boomers. So when people come to me, I've mentioned this in our financial pitfalls webinar we did earlier. They're talking about their, you guys still have pensions because you are city and state employees. A lot of Americans that we talk to and teach, corporate America, their pensions, those don't exist anymore. They do have Social Security, but they're worried, of course they're worried about that, and we'll get into that. They do have investments, but they're not near as safe as they used to be with volatility. The inflation is sky high. Taxation, our current tax law ends in 2025. I mentioned that in the first webinar. In 2025, which is 4.5 years from now, our current tax law is going to be completely revised, which means, give you an example, and this is my feelings, this is not fact yet, but most experts I speak to, they regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, political aisle, they agree that taxes will go up. So just an estimate is if you're at the 22% tax bracket, which today most folks I meet with are, more than likely you're going to be at 30 to 32%, and so on. So longevity risk, including taxation, market volatility, inflation, is a real risk. People are living a lot longer. And again, if you don't strategize for RMDs, and we'll talk about that, required minimum distributions, if you don't strategize for tax laws after 2025, the risk of outliving your assets because people are living a lot longer is a real risk, okay? Let me go on to, sorry, this is the beauty of sometimes doing technology, is that it doesn't, there we go. Okay, entitlement risk, the risk of government programs not providing enough income. Social Security, trust fund reserves projected to become exhausted in 2037. Medicare, estimated depletion date for trust fund is 2030. Now this workshop is not intended to scare people. I'll tell you right now, Social Security it's a long story, but every expert I talk to, there's no way it's going to end. Things will happen, and that is, like, I'm 43 years old. I more than likely will not be able to claim Social Security till I'm 70 or 72. So full retirement age, FRA, is going to be pushed out and out and out, okay? Social Security will be taxed more than likely much higher, okay? They are talking about means testing. What means testing means is, if you, essentially as it pertains to Social Security, is if you made a very good amount of money throughout your life and you're in a very high tax bracket in retirement, you know, the wealthy, not the average American, so no one here needs to worry unless you're expecting a huge inheritance or you're expecting to marry a multi-billionaire someday. The means testing means that you may not get your full or any benefit if you make enough in retirement already. That's not a law, but experts say that's where it could go. The bottom line is, entitlement risk and Social Security is a big worry. So in 1983, this is where I normally get hands, but in 1983, Ronald Reagan was in office, and Social Security, that was not supposed to ever be taxed, ever, okay? It began being taxed, 1983, okay? 1993, Bill Clinton was in office. And you see where I'm going, Republican, Democrat, it doesn't, you know, I'm not even going to go there. But regardless of who's in office, you're going to see things change. So in 1993, Bill Clinton was in office. Not only was Social Security taxed, now it was taxed more. It was taxed up to 85% if you're over a certain tax bracket, okay? So that's what occurred, and they're looking at possible means testing, pushing back full retirement age, you know, being taxed more. So entitlement risk, but I want everyone to know here, every expert I talk to, there's just no way Social Security is going to go away. So I don't want people to be worried, but be prepared that if you're 43 or 45 or 47, if you know, your full retirement age will more than likely be pushed out. Bottom line, it will be taxed more. Just be prepared that as we teach about three-legged stool, I mentioned this in the first webinar, which is why we do this second to kind of build off the first, but the three streams of income that Americans could rely on in retirement traditionally, which were Social Security, investments and savings, pensions. Pensions for most of America are gone, and the ones that do have them, I don't have a pension, but I understand many organizations, they're not as strong as they used to be, for the state and federal pensions that are out there. The three-legged stool for most Americans does not exist anymore. So entitlement risk is something that, if you don't plan ahead with tax exemption, we're going to get into options for tax exemption and why that's important. If you don't get into that, we're going to get into market volatility and why it's important to plan for that. But entitlement risk is a big risk that you have to prepare for. Excess withdrawal risk. The risk of drawing down assets too quickly. So we mentioned this, the 4% rule. Experts call this also the prudent man rule. Like, if you're being prudent, if you're being wise, the prudent man rule. This rule states, in my own words, that you can take out 4% of your principal per year from your tax-deferred IRAs and still maintain your quality of life financially in retirement, your principal. The prudent man rule. This has now gone down, which I teach, to about 3.4. Why has this gone down? Market volatility, inflation, taxation. I mentioned in the first webinar, first workshop, those are the three biggest killers I see, hands down. Hands down. Market volatility, taxation, inflation. If you can find a way to hedge against or even remove those, you're not going to remove inflation, but you can hedge against inflation fairly well. There are indexes today that we'll talk about with market volatility. I mentioned this in the first workshop. There are indexes today that do very, very well, that are still partnered with financial companies that insure the principal. So the historic fact, if you will, the consensus that you had to either give up growth for safety or give up safety for growth, today, it still applies in certain aspects, but there are indexes out there that are making, I know of one that made 18.45% last year, that still protects the principal through finance companies that are A+ rated 100% from loss. So that's another story down the road. But early withdrawal risk, if you are taking, I meet with folks who are taking 9, 10, 11% a year out of their IRAs. because they're thinking they're going to make a 12% a year. They're told by a certain expert that they're going to make X amount per year. If you are taking out consistently more than 4, I'll say 5, the 4% rule keeps you safe. If you are taking out consistently more than 5% a year of your tax deferred IRAs, pensions, TSPs, you're taking out too much. Okay, period. With the exception as if you know you're going to receive a large inheritance, if there are things down the road you are aware of that are going to change your financial situation down the road, that's a different story. But by all means, if you're not expecting any huge inheritance down the road or some trust, if you're taking out more than 5% a year, you're taking out too much. So excess withdrawal risk is a serious concern, and there are ways to hedge against that. There are ways to be in strong indexes, taking out 5% a year while you're tax exempting funds that will not only keep your principal safe, but keep you out of taxable liability, okay? Market risk. We talked about this. The risk of losing assets due to poor market performance. I won't spend too much time on this, but I will just tell you this. And I normally give this disclaimer at the beginning of all workshops. It's kind of passed my mind. The foundation is not anti-broker. We are not. You can make a lot of money in the market, and I've seen it. I've seen even friends from church. I've seen friends from my personal life make a fortune in real estate, make a fortune in certain stocks. I would be a fool to say you can't do very well in the market. What I am here to tell you is that probably 90% of the folks the foundation works with, federal, state employees, and in the last 3 years, it's been corporations like Coca-Cola, Sears, and so on, Lowe's Home Improvement. Most folks we work with are middle income Americans who are not expecting huge trusts or inheritances, who can in no way afford major loss, especially as they near retirement. If they're 43 years old and their spouse is working and they can afford the ups and downs, okay, that's fine. If they're 58 years old or 60 and they have positioned themselves very nicely to be safe, not wealthy, but safe in retirement, they come meet me. They have no idea about market risk or what it means or how to avoid it. They're in high risk funds. And I asked them, if this were to do an 08, I call it an 08, 2008, the crash. If this were to suffer that, how would this affect you? Most of them say it would affect me greatly. I would probably have to work 5 to 7 more years. There's all kinds of scenarios I can give you. The bottom line is, most folks I speak to that come into my office are on the phone, long distance. They cannot afford to lose great amounts that close to retirement. They just don't know different, bottom line. They don't know other avenues, aspects. So I'll be very transparent. I was in California a few years back in Sacramento doing a large DOT workshop for their Caltrans department. And a gentleman came up to me and wasn't happy with me afterwards, and his brother was an advisor, and that was, he just felt like I had an agenda. I said, that's fair. I don't have an agenda, but that's totally fair. I'll make sure that I mention why I have the belief system I do for the folks that I help. So that's why I say that. So market risk, bottom line is, the closer you get to retirement, most folks I work with have to be very mindful of the risk they're in, why they're in it, what their options are. Most folks, I'll just be frank with you, this is why the gentleman thought I had an agenda. When I see brokerage account statements, it'll tell clients about their gains. Those statements are very manipulated. When you look at front end fees, back end fees, expense ratios, fund fees, their net gain is nowhere near what that statement says, their net gain. Okay, so just be aware of your risk, be aware of what you're in, be aware of the fees that you're paying, be aware of your net gain, be aware of a lot. Okay, be aware. Number 6. Sorry, my computer is glitching. We'll get there. Asset allocation risk. The risk of investing too aggressively or too conservatively. We've already kind of touched on this. Playing it too safe decreases potential returns. Playing it too risky increases potential losses. Sorry, that should say losses. It says loses. We'll correct that. Most clients are unsure of their risk tolerance. Again, I've already I just went over this. They're unsure. If you're unsure, talk to the people you trust. Talk to friends. Reach out to people that you know. You're welcome to call us. You're welcome to email us. We're not here with an agenda of saying don't do this versus that. I mean, we'll definitely tell you some options that we believe are, great return potential with little to no risk. We'll definitely, if you want it, we'll definitely give you opinion. But with that said, reach out to the folks that you know and trust. Just learn about what is my tolerance. What if this happened to me? Where would I be? I have a friend who is I guess you would call it a construction manager, but he runs like an entire state. And he's just a big player in the construction industry, knows a lot about building and managing. And recently we were talking, and he says, we were talking about kind of in a nutshell what we're doing here. And he says, it's interesting, Spencer, you talk about, the three-legged stool and people that lose a ton before retirement. And because he says what we're doing is building these large, 4,000 or 5,000 square foot homes, but we're putting double master bedrooms or master suites on opposite ends of the home, the way we're designing them. And he says the reason we're doing that is because it is becoming more and more common for multi-generational families to live together, grandparents living with parents, their kids, because their pensions are weak, there are no pensions, or they just lost a ton in 08 or the dot-com bubble, or you name it. They're living together, and they're building homes big enough to where they can share the expenses and still have, peace and distance. So just be very mindful of your asset allocation risk and your risk tolerance. Number 7, sequence of return risk, the risk of early negative returns diminishing your portfolio over time. Now, this is very interesting. This and the tax exemption, or the tax slide up next in the future here, are probably my favorite parts. This is why this is my favorite workshop, because this really illustrates my belief system for most folks that are average Americans in the market. Okay, I'm going to show you a sequence of return risk. So let me forward this here. So you have this is, let me pause this real quick. This tends to have a brain of its own, so give me a moment here. So this sometimes takes off. Let me go back here. This is a slide that for some reason has its own mind and sometimes takes off. Let me go back. So you got Melinda and Abigail. I'm sorry, the slide's taken off. So let me just pause this here. And what's happened is Melinda and Abigail both invest the same amount of money. I'm trying to go back. This slideshow sometimes takes off and sometimes does not. But let me go back here. Let me show you something here. Forgive me for this glitch. Okay. So Melinda and Abigail both invest $1 million. Okay. They're taking out 40 grand a year in income once they retire. I'm trying to fix this here before going. This will make a lot of sense to you if this works for me. And this is the downside to technology, but let me try to fix this. Give me a moment here. I'm trying to go back to step 1 and kind of show you exactly where we're at. What this shows is what happens just with timing. Both investors, Abigail, Melinda, they invest $1 million. They both are taking out $40,000 a year, which is 4%, right? Following the 4% rule. Abigail and Melinda ends up having really bad luck and timing. Abigail has really good luck initially in time. I'm going to let this go to the very end because it won't stop for me, and I'm going to show you the price add timing. Forgive me for that not working. The price of that time. Let me just see. The bottom line is, I'm sorry about that. I had brain dump day. These two investors started with the same amount of money, $1 million. They both were taking out $40,000 a year in income. Abigail had 2 positive years immediately. Melinda had 2 negative years immediately. Then Melinda had 2 positive years and Abigail had 2 negative years. But because of Abigail's immediate positive returns, it shows you how the price of bad timing really is a legitimate issue in the market, where Abigail ended up having over $100,000, $400,000 more than Melinda, simply because they both invested the same amount of money, but one had really bad luck with her first initial years being huge losses from that large amount. The price of bad timing. This is why I go, I'm sorry, I can send you this PowerPoint. You can look at the slide yourself. You can pause it. For some reason, it's not working as I'm live here, of course. And I'll send this to you and you can review that. But the bottom line is, what you'll see is, the reason we show that is when you are closer to retirement, let's say you're both 60 with the same amount of assets and you stay in the market risk, if you have a couple of bad years before you retire, you will be significantly in a worse spot than the friend who had a couple of good years with the same amount of money, same distributions that they were taking, same tax brackets, all was the same. One had a couple of bad years. The other had a couple of good years. At the end of the day, they were $400,000 apart from each other. Now, granted, they were working with $1 million. If you're working with maybe 200 grand, yes, it won't be $400,000 apart, but the principle is the same, okay? The cost of bad timing is significant. And as you get nearer to retirement, if you don't start to strategize on that and go into more and more conservative forms of investing, you will probably be working longer, or you won't have the same quality of life financially when you retire. Number 8, inflation risk, the risk of rising costs undermining your purchasing power in retirement. How much will the same lifestyle cost you when you retire? So I'll give you kind of an example. I was up in Washington, D.C. At the FDA, actually. And had I'll be honest with you, I was kind of intimidated because there were probably about 80 folks at the workshop. And of those folks at the workshop, probably, a large majority were scientists. They were PhDs and MDs that, do what the FDA does, right? They were very, very bright individuals. And, I'm not a dumb guy by any means, but I'm sure not an individual with an MD working at the FDA. And one gentleman got up and he gave me all kinds of figures as to why inflation is kind of a scare tactic and whatnot. And I wasn't going to debate with a really intellectual guy. Number one, I'm not going to debate with anyone at a workshop anyway. But I did say, well, here's my experience. I said my grandfather was a high school history teacher in Northern California, nice small town, Northern California. He raised a family of 5, my mom and her 2 sisters, so 3 girls, my grandmother, family of 5. He supported a family of 5 on one income. They had a home that was nice. It wasn't extravagant, but it was a nice 3,000 square foot home. They had 2 small family cars. I said, today, anywhere in America, the roughest areas you can think of that are inexpensive, if you will, for as far as cost of living, could you be a high school history teacher and support a family of 5 on one income? And the answer is not without being in poverty. So I said, all I can tell you is that's inflation, if you ask me. That's inflation. And the whole crowd really started laughing. I wasn't trying to be a funny guy. But I go back to that moment that I didn't really know how to outwit this gentleman. I wasn't there to outwit him, but I just used a basic scenario, and inflation risk is real, okay? So let's go back to this. So the difference 30 years can make. You've got 85 stamps for 22 cents. They're now 55 cents, right? I believe they're 55 cents. Dozen eggs, gallon of milk, gallon of gas. Here in North Carolina, that's probably about right. You go to California, they all laugh. It's about $3.90 there right now. Electricity, new homes. I would say the average new home in North Carolina is probably that or a little bit more. California, it's probably 400 grand. So the difference 30 years can make is quite significant. Medical expense risk. Consider out-of-pocket expenses, prescription drugs, home health care, nursing care. Someone turning age 65 today has almost a 70% chance of needing some type of long-term care services and support in remaining years. Why is that? This is where I would get hands again. Well, we're living a lot longer, okay? So as we age and medical advancements are great, what that also means is that when we're living into old age, regardless of medical care, there's a significant chance that we're going to need some type of long-term care. We need to plan for that. I will tell you today, traditional long-term care is obsolete. It's obsolete. It's been kind of exposed as being a racket. People realize there's no equity in long-term care policies. They pound them forever. I would tell you this: there are ways to hedge against this. There are ways to take advantage of tax-exempt accounts that will also allow you to use those accounts tax-exempt for long-term care, chronic illness. So there are ways to hedge against this that are becoming popular amongst a lot of, regardless of whether you're a securities broker, whether you're just a Medicare advisor. There are ways to hedge against medical expense risk and long-term care and what they call Medicaid spend down, which is going through all your assets before you get any type of help. Some of those ways also include trusts, and we'll get into that, right? But there are significant ways today to strategize and hedge against medical expense risk. Tax risk, the risk of rising or unforeseen tax in your portfolio. So we're going to talk about tax now, tax later, and tax never accounts. You can't assume you'll be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. I've touched on that with my experience with dealing with, state and federal employees who have, 6 streams of income rather than 2 in retirement. So what is that? This is where I get hands up to. So tax now would be, dividends you're making on securities, right? That's tax now. You're taxed every year for your dividends, for income or growth you're receiving on investments now. Tax later would be like tax deferred 401ks, 403bs, 401as, TSPs if you're a federal government employee. That's tax later, tax deferred. Tax never. What is tax never? That is tax exempt accounts like Roths or endowments. There are tax never accounts that if you will start strategizing now, you will be in such a good spot. I should say a much better spot down the road. So the reason tax never, you want to really focus on tax never, the new tax laws in 2025, you'll be exempt from those. Your growth will not be taxed regardless of future tax brackets. RMDs, which are required minimum distributions. So it used to be 70.5, it is now 72. The Secure Act changed that law in December of last year. So people who have IRA investments, tax deferred investments, now have they have until 72, but at 72, the IRS says whether you like it or not, we're going to tax you on your IRA investments because they want revenue. They need tax revenue. So the more you're able to put into tax never accounts, those are exempt from RMDs, exempt. Also, we talk a lot about tax exempt wealth transfer. The more you're able to put into Roths or endowments, if you will, which are also tax exempt strategies, when you pass away, they cannot be taxed at all to your beneficiaries. So to give you an example, if you have a $100,000 401k and you pass away, that entire amount is taxed to your estate or to your beneficiaries. If you have a $100,000 Roth IRA, 0% of that is taxed to your beneficiaries, 0. So the more, that's what we talk about tax exempt wealth transfer. There are ways that you can set yourself up for tax exemption during your retirement years. There are ways you can set your beneficiaries up for tax exemption when you pass away, that your estate receives no taxes, or if your estate is going to be taxed because it's large, you can offset that taxable liability by creating tax exempt accounts to offset that, okay? So we're going to go into this here. So, sorry, let me go into this. There we go. This computer today's having a brain of its own. All right, let me move. Okay, so potential tax. Let's say you have a $500,000 IRA, okay? Give you a scenario. You're 66 years old with a 25% tax liability. Your IRA is worth 500 grand, growing at 5% annually. No income withdrawn from the account. Money from your RMDs, which again is required minimum distributions, is not used for income at all. It's reallocated to other financial vehicles earning taxable growth at 5% annually. So that's not uncommon for folks to say, hey, I don't need this money that I'm taking out. The government's just forcing me to take this out. So I'm going to take this money per year and put it into my money market or other stocks or savings. Okay. The account holder lives to age 90. So let's go to this total. So with all of these, with this premise here, let's go to this. So total taxes paid on RMDs at withdrawal. $164,337. Okay, that's total taxes you paid on RMDs when you were forced to take it out of your $500,000 account. Taxes paid on reallocated assets. So the money you took that money and reinvested it. The taxes you paid on that growth, $67,388. Taxes paid by your heirs on remaining IRA value at death, $106,665. Total taxes paid, $338,389. So out of 500 grand, you paid $338,000 in taxes out of $500,000. Okay. Now remember that number, $338,000 in taxes. Okay. Now let's go into a tax exempt Roth. Okay. So you have $500,000, all the same numbers up there. Your 66, 25% liability, all the same numbers. Taxes paid on Roth conversion, $125,000. Those are the taxes you paid because you're 25% liability. Now the taxes you paid on your growth, $0. Taxes paid on remaining Roth value at death, $0. Total taxes paid, $125,000. So you went from paying $338,000 on your traditional IRA to paying $125,000 on a Roth. You saved a couple hundred grand, okay, a little over a couple hundred grand in taxation. That is a significance. And I will tell you, you know, today you wouldn't take, I mean, this illustration is correct and you could do this. You would not take normally 25%, which is 125 lump sum year one. You could, but even today experts say that there's even more ways. You know, if you do that systematically, you take out over a 5 to 10 year period, you know, you take out, you know, 12,000 a year as opposed to 125 overnight. You're not paying 25, you're even on a lesser tax bracket. You're paying less in taxes with the same outcome, okay? The bottom line is, the more you're able to tax exempt to convert to Roths or endowments, you're in a much, much better spot. Here are the 2020 tax brackets, okay, for you to, and if you want to, you're welcome to take a picture of this. Sorry about that. These are the 2020 tax brackets, okay? This computer is having its fun. 10, 12, 22, 24, 32, 35, and 37. Obviously, you can be between single, head of household, married, filing joint, or qualifying, married, filing separate. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're at the 22% tax bracket and you're married, filing joint. What that means is if let's say you and your spouse combined make $120,000 adjusted gross income combined. If you're at the 22% tax bracket, that means that year, if you'd like to convert, you are able to convert. You have roughly $51,050 in wiggle room. You can convert that amount of money into Roth or endowment without going to the next tax bracket. If you were to convert more than that, you would then jump to the 24% tax bracket, and it would not be a wise financial tax move, which is why we say generally we do the $125,000 Roth conversion for a simplistic example, but generally what you would do is look at your tax bracket and you would convert only the amount that would keep you in the same tax bracket per year or less. You wouldn't want to jump that because your tax bracket would go up, but the concept remains the same. Personal or event risk, number 11. The risk of unanticipated personal or family circumstances, fear of the unknown. Incapacity risk. The reason I go on this real quick, it's obvious. COVID, health issues, bankruptcies, lawsuits, injuries. There are so many risks out there. This is kind of a common sense risk 11. Fear of the unknown. We have to be mindful, and again, it goes back to before you retire, you know, your risk tolerance should go down as you get closer to retirement. But a serious risk. One thing I want to touch on, we do touch on in the first webinar. If you have significant assets or inheritances, it is a wise idea to whoever carries your car and your homeowner's insurance to go and look into a umbrella policy. You can generally get liability coverage for very, very cheap with an umbrella policy. Today, we're in a very litigious society. That liability coverage can do you wonders if you are, if you go to litigation and they want to sue your estate. So I do want to hit on that. Personal event risk number 11 is what we're going through right now with COVID, with all the unknowns, but also not a bad idea to hedge against that and to look into umbrella liability coverage. 12, sorry, this should say 12, I'll correct that also. Incapacity risk. The risk of being able to manage oneself and finances in retirement. That should also say the risk of being unable to manage. So we'll fix those. In addition to preparing monetarily, have a living will, a power of attorney, last will and testament, comprehensive estate plan, living trust, special. This is so important. I tell folks, we taught this in the first workshop, you've got to have a will. Go to your nearest attorney. If you go on LegalZoom, great, it's legal, but I will tell you, you got to still get it. You got to get it notarized. If you make mistakes, it's on you. I would go to an attorney, have them establish a will. I tell people we have an estate attorney in our office. He charges crumbs to do this. He just charges for his time. He has so much other business to do. He really does it as a favor. You're welcome to email us if you want his information. I can give it to you. He is based in Apex, really good guy, very professional. No matter who you use, do get a living will, get that taken care of. This isn't here, but do a POD or a TOD, which is at your bank. POD is payable on death. TOD is transfer on death. TOD is for securities. POD is for liquid savings checkings. When you pass away, if you do not have a living will in place, or will, and you do not have a POD established, the bank can freeze your assets for up to 30 days. It's a mess. Get a will. If you have children or grandchildren with special needs, the special needs trust can do wonders. Spendthrift trust. If you have children, grandchildren, or spouses with, and I mean this sincerely, spending addictions. I know some people might laugh, but if you have people who may have addiction issues, spending issues, spendthrift trusts are wonderful. They will delegate a certain amount of money per month, per quarter, per year, however the trust mandates, to where a beneficiary cannot blow through a inheritance. It is, they can state if so and so they have to make 50 grand a year to get 50 grand a year. There are so many stipulations you can put in there. Spendthrift trusts, I've seen. I will have one for my kids, not because they have drug issues or I just don't want them to feel like oh, this is it, I'm set. I want them to always be responsible and work for a living, but also have comfort to know that they've got financial means that will assist them. So incapacity risk is huge. Have a power of attorney. My grandmother's 92 and my mom is a power of attorney. My aunt's power of attorney. Big deal. It saves a lot of stress and headache. IRA beneficiary trust, they're awesome. They can do a lot for taxation. The new Secure Act has changed that a little bit, but again, go to a estate attorney and trust. Again, I will tell you ours, I'm just putting it out there to save you all money. He does it for crumbs. If you get into the trust work and he's got to work, it's still cheaper. One we've had, I can just tell you one recently. A gentleman came to us who was charged $8,000 for a very, very in-depth trust, and our guy here charged him $2,000 for basic work. So I just am looking to save you guys cost if you're getting gouged. But make sure you reach out to us if you do want our help. We're happy to help you with that. But incapacity risk is a major, major, major risk going forward. So a snapshot of the essentials. With the help of trusted professional, you can identify your risk tolerance, access a detailed plan indicating when you might run out of money, take advantage of employer-sponsored plans and matches, keyword matches. We'll talk about that another time, but if you're not getting a match in your 401k, not a good idea at all. Too many other ways to make tax-exempt safer growth. Create predictable income you cannot outlive, redistribute assets to ensure diversification and use of tax now, tax later, and tax never buckets. Hopefully tax never buckets, right? Create a peace of mind. Create peace of mind you deserve in preparing for the future. Give me a second. I think we're about out of time, but I'm going to, who has questions? Let me open this up for questions. We're at 45 after. I try to limit it. Let me see here who has questions. She says, I think number 5 was skipped. Let's go back to number 5. Let's go back to number 5 here. I was by somebody that think number 5 was skipped. So let's go back to number 5. Give me a moment here. I'm sorry that slide, I can send this all to you. I'm sorry it had a mind of its own. Number 5, lifestyle risk. Maybe you're correct, and I'm sorry if that was, that goes back, lifestyle risk, the risk of being unable to maintain your standard of living. Thank you, I didn't know that. I'm sorry about that. It goes back to the construction, I call him a construction manager. I don't know what his title is. It goes back to if you are not strategizing and preparing for future tax law, market volatility, hedging against that and inflation, you will not more than likely be able to live the same quality of life you want to in retirement financially, or you'll be working longer. So it goes back to the gentleman who, building huge homes for multi-generational families living together. It goes back to working rather than, retiring at 60 as a state employee, retiring at 65, 67. So that's a good question. I'm sorry that was, skipped. I'm sorry the technology wasn't, I did not notice that. I appreciate you mentioning that. Again, we can send this out. You guys are welcome to review that slide. The slide is really, I like the slide that shows 2 investors, one with 2 bad years initially, and how that really affected them going forward. Any other questions? Any other questions on this? So far, I just had one question. Any other questions on this this information? Let me make sure. Okay, so far, and it's okay, no problem at all. I don't have any questions. I don't want to keep you guys longer than necessary during your business day. Again, you'll have a brief survey. Feel free if you don't want to ask questions here to ask the questions. Feel free to let me know if you want this PowerPoint. I'm happy to get it to you. I hope this is worth your time. I know I tend to speak a little quickly. I'm sorry about the technology glitch with the comparison of bad timing, but let me know if you guys have questions. I would love to fill the survey out. The survey really helps me. I do have a question. Hold on one second. How do we contact you individually? Well, in the survey, I believe the survey asks, do you have any questions? You can say yes, please. My email, let's let you know. My email is Spencer, S-P-E-N-C-E-R, Spencer at F like Frank, the number 3, E like Edward, online.org. Spencer at f3eonline.org. You're welcome to email me any questions you have. You're welcome to, if you have questions, email me, and happy to answer your email. I'm happy. Some folks say, hey, can we, talk briefly over the phone next week? I'm happy to do that. Whatever you guys need, we're happy to help. A good question. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it very much. Look forward to doing some more in the future. We have several other workshops that we offer. Look forward. I hope this was worth your time, and I hope it was helpful. And you guys have a wonderful day. Take care.